Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of JaianMusic Notes. Today is a very exciting episode for me because there's something fascinating about forgotten games. Not the legendary failures that become internet memes, not the cult classics that develop into devoted fan followings over decades. I'm talking about the games that just existed, were released, reviewed poorly, and vanished into the ether of gaming history. Today, I want to talk about Yu Yu Hakusho Tournament Tactics for the Game Boy Advance. It was released in November 2004 by Atari, developed by Sensory Sweep Studios and Screaming Games, and this tactical RPG adaptation of the Dark Tournament arc was scored a brutal 43 out of 100 on Metacritic. Game Zone gave it a 4.6 out of 10, and it was just very not critically acclaimed. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Somebody composed music for this game, 14 tracks to be exact, and since over 2 decades of its release, I haven't found one substantial discussion about this soundtrack anywhere. So today, I'm going to change that. Welcome back to JaianMusic Notes, the podcast where we complete soundtrack and we just deep dive into anime music. I'm a big anime music nerd. This is a podcast where I review my own covers of anime songs, where I break down the soundtrack of anime and anime movies. Today we're doing this video game. But before we do that, I want to thank the sponsor of the podcast, Laser Audio Technologies. When you think of video game soundtracks, movie soundtracks, just music and sound in general, you need plugins. Well, Laser Audio Technologies provides the tools to make everything you need for your sound. They have creative effects plugins, and if you use code JaianMusic, you get 30% off at checkout. So let's kind of contextualize tournament tactics. To understand the soundtrack, you first need to understand the Game Boy Advance in 2004. By November 2004, the GBA, for short, was in its twilight years. The Nintendo DS had been announced, the PSP was on the horizon, and developers were really pushing this little handheld device to its absolute limits. The GBA's audio chips was impressive, but also limiting. It only had 6 channels of sound, and that's not much. And it wasn't big when you compare it to a SNES or a PlayStation, but clever composers had been making magic happen within those constraints since the early 2000s. We have, I think, about 14 songs that I found online that complete the soundtrack, and they're all named BGM01, BGM02. They're all labeled as background music. I couldn't even find the exact name of the composer for this game. No composer's website is saying that they compose or claiming that they compose this thing. So I kind of want to talk about some highlight tracks here. First of all, we got to talk about the opening track here. It's just a progression. There's an attempt at gravitas here, like with the bass line, to evoke a kind of epic and adventurous tone. Obviously, like I highly recommend, please go listen to the soundtrack also to really get the idea. I cannot feature it on the episode. The melody sets in this comfortable mid-range, nothing too ambitious, but we get for this forward momentum. You can hear the pulse, you can hear, that mid-range doing the heavy lifting, and it's creating a sound that really tries to bridge the orchestral intent, but the chiptune aesthetic of that. And what strikes me most about this track is its restraint. It's not trying to blow you away. It's not overreaching. The composer knew exactly what the GBA could do and stayed within that, within those boundaries very safely. That's not necessarily a criticism. Sometimes a game needs music that doesn't demand attention. And it's a tactical game. You're supposed to get in the mood and thinking about what your next move is. And then we have tracks like the second background music. This is where things get a little bit more interesting. I feel more of a tension in this one. It's this combat can be too intense because players might be staring at this battle for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You want something that just kind of loops in, is well structured, and where the primary melodic phrasing reoccurs over and over again. And what I really like about that is that it really made a melodic melody that looped that never became monotonous. The tempo was, pretty fast than what you expect for a strategy game, but makes sense for a Yu Yu Hakusho adaptation because it's still a very action-packed game. And then there's other songs like the background music number 4 that stuck out to me. It takes a different approach to battle music, where number 2 was more about that momentum that was building. This track has breathing room, those delayed percussions. It's more of a music that's designated for a time destination in the game mode, where you're racing against the clock, but there's there's a specific location to reach on the map. The use of space here is surprisingly sophisticated. Not every beat needs to be filled. The composer understood that silence or near silence, therefore like a decay of some sort, would create just enough tension or as much tension than a wall of sound or consistent like background music number 2. Then there's obviously background music number 7, which to me really sounded melodically similar to Smile Bomb, the opening of Yu Yu Hakusho, but it's a short track, only 36 seconds long, and this short cue is super fascinating to me because they reveal so much about how the composer thinks about musical economy. You have less than 40 seconds to accomplish something. You set a mood, mark a transition, reward the player, and create tension. So in that sense, like every single second, every single note really matters the most. And then looking at background music number 7, it's some type of like victory fanfare or like a mission complete theme to me. It's bright, it feels major, and it just screams, you did it. Then another one I wanted to point out is background music 5. It serves a similar function, but with more development. The sound is more explorative. There's a slower tempo than the battle songs on number 2. But what's interesting here is that there's an attempt at atmosphere. The GBA wasn't known for atmospheric music. The hardware, it was better suited for bright, punchy melodies, but this track is reaching for something quieter and more introspective, which is nice because you really have musical, emotional balance in this soundtrack. Because of that, it's important to divvy up the emotions and not just have like 14 like battle songs or intensity songs. This is still a tactic and strategy based game at the end of the day. And then background music number 8 is one of the longer songs on the soundtrack. It's a loop that becomes like very weird to me by like the 5th repetition. It's well constructed and can play for hours without becoming grating, but the difference comes down to the variation in the development here. This track has a clear like structure, like there's a section that establishes the primary theme, another section that develops it with new harmonic material, and by the end you have a bright bridge that brings you back to that first theme, which I really found really interesting. I like the way it like was broken into pieces because of that. But here's where I need to address the elephant in the room. This like didn't sound like Yu Yu Hakusho. The anime series has a legendary soundtrack. The composer for the original Japanese broadcast had moody, atmospheric, and occasional bursts of frenetic energy during fight scenes. So it was a very eclectic soundtrack. The English dub featured hard rock songs. There's also the Poltergeist report that had haunting orchestral work. But this was a tactical RPG game in 2004, and that doesn't mean that we need the same thing as the anime. We need its own thing, but this sound was more like Fire Emblem than like Yu Yu Hakusho. And in the context of a tactical RPG, that's arguably the right decision. Players need music that supports strategic thinking, like a game of chess. This is a little bit like a game of chess with Yu Yu Hakusho characters being your pawns, your queen, your king, and etc. And then I really think it's important to like go back to these the unmade comparison, like what it could have been. This game is important to talk about. In Japan, Yu Yu Hakusho had multiple successful video game adaptations. The PS2 saw Dark Tournament, an action game with original scores that captured the series' energy perfectly. And this game, I feel like the GBA version is a little bit more disregarded, not as like spoken about. I really don't find a lot of material about it. So I felt very important to me to like share thoughts and have some type of commentary piece on the music and the soundtrack of this video game. So what we do take away from Yu Yu Hakusho tournament tactics for me is I think there's something valuable in analyzing music like this. Soundtracks that were never meant to be remembered, games that, were not commercial successes and were criticized, but the music was written almost anonymously for this. So was it doomed from the start because of that? It's still something that someone wrote at some point, and it's still a music that supported the Yu Yu Hakusho timeline. So to me, it's important that the commentary about this exists. A reminder to everyone, of course, that the artwork for the podcast is provided by GoPro Kyo. I always say it at the beginning, but I'm saying it at the end today. I was just so wanting to get into the topic, didn't want to forget about it. A big thank you to him. He does all the artwork for the podcast, so please go check him out. His links are in the description. A big shout out to Laser Audio Technologies. Use code JaianMusic at checkout for 30% off. You can go to JaianMusic.com, my website. Do not forget to follow me at JaianMusic on social media. And of course, you can follow the podcast JaianMusic Notes in your favorite podcatcher. Leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.